everyone, welcome to Curious People Wanted. I'm Dr. Darren Raymond Locke, curator of the Barnum Museum here in Bridgeport, Connecticut. I thought it might be good to get a change of scenery today, so we are going on a little field trip, and don't worry, we don't need a signed permission slip for this one. We usually film inside, but I thought it would be great to give you a proper view of our museum. Well, at least a view of the scaffolding and netting. We are undergoing major restoration, and while our executive director, Kathy Marr, has talked about the restoration, I thought it would be great to give you a history of this building itself. P.T. Barnum was a showman, for sure, but he was also a big proponent of public benefaction. In 1886, he purchased an 80 by 80 foot lot on the corner of Main and Gilbert Streets for $13,000, with the intention of gifting the lot to the Bridgeport Scientific Society and the Fairfield County Historical Society. He envisioned constructing a building that would function as the permanent home for both, providing space for collections and a venue for intellectual exchange. In the true Barnum fashion, Mr. B also decided that the building itself would be an architectural gem that would make Bridgeport proud. Although he probably was continuously developing his ideas, nothing really happened at this lot on the corner of Main and Gilbert Streets for about 5 years. In early March 1891, Barnum hired local architectural firm Lambert and Bonnell to prepare plans for a building which would cover the entire lot. The architects envisioned a 4-story brick building with brownstone trim and a high tower for a clock, something that was apparently much desired and needed on Main Street. The first floor was arranged to support 3 retail stores, the rent from which would generate revenue and support the operating and maintenance costs of the building itself. The second floor was to be divided into 3 rooms, one each for the Bridgeport Scientific Society, Fairfield County Historical Society, and the Bridgeport Medical Society. The third floor would have a large hall for lectures, and the top floor rooms to be used for administration. Ever conscious of modernity, Barnum also required the firm to equip the building with the most modern of conveniences, including heating, ventilation, and fireproof vaults. It was to be named the P.T. Barnum Endowment for Science and History. Interestingly, Lambert and Bonnell were not the firm who would actually carry out the plans. Just 10 days after the newspaper, the Newtown Bee, published a description of the building, newspapers declared that the contracts had actually been awarded to a new architectural firm, that of Longstaff and Hurd. Longstaff and Hurd were well established in Bridgeport at that time and were responsible for designing Barnum's 4th and last home, Marina, as well as many public buildings and schools in the city. The plans produced by the firm were very similar to those proposed by Lambert and Bonnell, although there were additional spaces for exhibition and more exterior decorative elements. Soon after the contracts were signed, Longstaff and Hurd began excavating the cellar of the building, which was by this time dubbed the Barnum Institute of Science and History. While construction had not yet officially started, the cellar had been dug by the time Mr. Barnum died on April 7, 1891. He bequeathed an additional $100,000 for the construction of the building in his will, to which his widow, Nancy Fish, later added an additional $50,000. Construction started quickly. Before his death, Barnum had given strict instructions to Longstaff and Hurd that the building must be completed in as short a time as possible. In May 1891, Longstaff and Hurd decided to alter the approved plans of the building and, at their own expense, added an astronomical observatory near the dome. While they had not secured a telescope yet, their intention was to make sure the tower could accommodate and protect an equatorial mounted achromatic telescope equal to that at Yale University. This alteration cost the architects $500, the equivalent of a little less than $17,000 today. The tower, however, was never finished and actually had to be partially dismantled. When the tower reached its maximum height, the next-door neighbor, Aaron Thomas Beardsley, a master builder himself, realized that 80 feet into the air, the tower projected 4.5 inches into his own property. Longstaff and Hurd investigated and found that Beardsley was right. The tower did infringe upon his property. They tried to persuade Mr. Beardsley to waive his objections, but he held firm and offered to rent the land to them for $40 a year. Not wanting to make that commitment, the architects had to remove the overhang, rendering the tower useless since it could not support the telescope itself. The construction continued without further incident, and by April 8, 1892, the exterior of the building was complete. The interior was next. The building was completed and officially opened its doors on February 18, 1893. In its final form, the Barnum Institute of Science and History was a 4-story brownstone building which, although a mix of architectural styles, was primarily Romanesque, with towering round arches and thick walls. A band of sculpted terracotta created by Belgian artist Henri Placher between the second and third floor displays foliage and animals, and a larger frieze underneath the dome depicts historical scenes and busts of important figures. Inside, the building was partitioned as planned. The first floor retail space with its large windows could be accessed by double doors on the corner of the building, while the first and second floors with their gallery and exhibition spaces, offices, and lecture hall could be reached by the recessed double doors on Main Street. In terms of use, the building didn't function entirely as Barnum had hoped, honestly. The building initially held the collections of the Bridgeport Scientific Society, Bridgeport Medical Society, and Fairfield County Historical Society. It also had exhibit space, a resource library, and a lecture hall which welcomed presentations by notable people of the time, including Thomas Edison, the Wright brothers, artist John Ferguson Weir, botanist William Henry Brewer, and George Loring Porter, the U.S. Army surgeon that buried Lincoln's assassin, John Wilkes Booth. During the first 4 years, the Institute saw thousands of visitors from Bridgeport and abroad. Although Barnum had planned for the financial support of the societies by organizing retail space whose rent would pay operating costs of the building, the societies found the plan difficult to implement. They devised an alternative and secured short-term financing plans which involved 3-year promises of $2,500 per annum. While a fine and good idea in and of itself, it didn't work in practice. By 1899, the societies were struggling and merged into one organization called the Bridgeport Scientific and Historical Society. This was also not viable, and membership began to wane in the early 20th century. The Bridgeport Scientific and Historical Society began to rent the lecture room to other groups, including the Daughters of the American Revolution, Audubon, Industrial League, Connecticut Society of Social Hygiene, and the Art League. By 1903, the BSHS was truly hard-pressed to maintain the building. Their collection, valued at $25,000, was visited by between 300 and 400 people per week, but the organization was at the end of their financial resources and were unable to pay the $750 per year in maintenance costs. To recoup some of this money and stay solvent, the society began renting a significant portion of the building to the Bridgeport Hydraulic Company. At the end of 1914, Bridgeport Hydraulic occupied the cellar and the first and second floors. Although the income generated from their rent allowed the society to renovate the historical room and install new exhibits a few years earlier, it could not exist without the rent money. In 1914, BSHS entered into a new lease with Bridgeport Hydraulic, which would pay a monthly rent of $1,125.50 per month for the next 10 years. As part of this agreement, the hydraulic company would renovate the building and make all necessary repairs. To accomplish this, they hired local architect Ernest G. Southey, who ultimately built the hydraulic company's own building across the street at 835 Main Street. The BSHS continued to hold on and in 1921 welcomed 3,149 visitors to the building, 75% of which were from out of town. 8 years later, however, things drastically changed. The city accountants realized the society had generated significant income from renting space in the building and was responsible for over $32,384.02 in back taxes and fines for default of payment. This issue wore on for a few years, but in 1934, the city filed a friendly tax foreclosure action to collect liens and taxes amounting to over $48,000. In so doing, the city took over the building and closed it for cleaning and refurbishment. It reopened in 1936. Although the societies maintained space in the third floor, the city used the rest of the building for Board of Education and city offices. The Institute temporarily closed in 1943 and the interior was remodeled as a City Hall annex. After the building reopened in 1946, the third floor was, once again, reserved for the display of the Bridgeport Scientific and Historical Society's collections. During the 1960s, a group of concerned citizens and city officials stimulated new community interest in Barnum's museum. Municipal offices housed in the building were moved to the newly built City Hall in 1965, and a program to restore the building to its former status as a museum was initiated by community leaders. The building was repaired, and the interior spaces remodeled to accommodate a wide range of exhibits focusing on the history of Bridgeport and the story of P.T. Barnum himself. Thanks for joining me today for Curious People Wanted. Make sure to keep joining me as we discover Barnum together by subscribing to our channel, and remember to stay curious.